Greetings, nerds and newcomers. My name's Austin Alesso, and after some small issues, we are back online. So, let's just do a quick test to make sure everything is working as it's supposed to be, as I've changed a few settings here. Alright, we seem pretty good. So, alright, let's begin and see what everyone's been up to here. So, we have one last check. Yep, we should be good. Cool. So we have here on Reddit, try a Freaky Friday body swap with your players and player characters by Laura D24 D23 at DM Academy. Try a Freaky Friday body swap. Hi all, a few days ago I had to miss a session. Don't want to leave my players party short-handed for a tough battle, so I told one of the players to take over my character for that session. As I started saying that, I decided to choose a person and characters who at least like mine. I have a high elf warlock that's given into dark side, so I've chosen to choose a player who has loving, positive, lawful, good wizard to play mine. The group had a blast and laughed at her trying to act tough, and that gave us to use the idea for a Freaky Friday session where we all swap players and try our best to RP each other player characters play. You can also make it a curse that affects your character. It's just a fun session that doesn't affect the story at all. It's fun learning different classes, figuring out what they would do in that situation, and seeing how other people think you act. I mean, that one is... It's a pretty good idea for a one-shot or just being silly for a session, if that's the kind of tone and the narrative that the DM wants and that the players want to play. That's definitely not a bad idea. It's I wouldn't put it in a kind of grim dark or a, you know, like Curse of Strahd like module or anything that's more horror based, as that's definitely going to mess with the tone of the setting. But yeah, for a fun one-shot, that's just fine enough. Say anything else with that, with Laura? They do not. Cool. Alright. This is not a bad idea for a one-shot or a silly session should everybody be game. Period. I think to pull this off, you have to get like-minded individuals to play and agree upon this. Period. This is not something that I would recommend depending upon the setting of the campaign, i.e. Grimdark, Curse of Strahd, horror themes, etc. Period. Alright, this is not bad. We'll clean this up. This is not bad for wrong 4 there for one shot or silly session. Should everybody be game? I think to pull this off, you have to get like-minded individuals to play and agree upon this. It's not something that I would recommend depending upon the setting of the campaign. Say setting slash theme of the campaign. Id est Grimdark. STR Strahd. We'll say more gothic horror, etc. Okay. Cool. Alright, that one down. Let's see, we got some maps here. Jeff Goldblum, star in Dungeons & Dragons podcast. Ooh, that sounds awfully neat. Alright, so we have Dungeon Masters, Bone Great Axe. By Adventure Bundles on Dungeon Masters subreddit. A simple but flavorful homebrew item. Bone Great Axe. This great axe was actually used by the giants as a carving knife, and it's made out of a single bone of a huge animal. You gain a +2 bonus to attack and damage rolls made with this weapon. Due to its weight, its damage types are 2, with the highest d6 being the slashing one. Okay. It doesn't say what rarity. That's kind of a problem. Secondly, if you are going to do this online, there would be kinda no easy way to do that with like Roll20 or their Fantasy Grounds or any other online application like that. I feel like you just need to, if you're going to do split damage, I think you just need to do 1d6 bludgeoning, 1d6 slashing to make it less confusing, especially if the enemies have any kind of resistances to slashing but not bludgeoning, or vulnerability like skeletons or that sort of make. They post anything else. This is a pretty neat idea, period. However, I see a big problem with online tabletops like Roll20 or Fantasy Grounds in having the damage type be appropriately fixed, period. Since it varies, this is going to cause a great deal of issues and confusion, period. Especially if you deal with monsters that have immunity to one type or vulnerability to another type, like skeletons with bludgeoning damage, period. Alright, this is a pretty neat idea. However, I see a big problem with online tabletops like Roll20 or Fantasy Grounds and having the damage type be appropriately fixed. Since it varies, this is going to cause a great deal of issues and confusion, especially if you deal with monsters that have immunity to one type of owner building. One type of damage, full immunity. Immunity, one type of damage, or vulnerability to another type like skeletons of bludgeoning damage. If you are going to keep the hybridized damage types, I would recommend having 1d6 bludgeoning and 1d6 slashing, period. Okay. Not a bad item. That's going to be a kind of a nightmare to do online, and even just figuring things out. Wait, what was that one? Was the 4 the slashing, or that sort of a problem? Tools for pacing your game. Ooh. D&D behind the screen of scenes and sequels. Alright, this is a long one by Arvar27. What does pacing mean in the context of D&D? We throw this term around instinctually when the game is exciting, things are happening. We call it fast-paced. When it's slow, we haven't rolled initiative in 5 sessions. It's slow-paced. We want things to be snappy, but not so rushed that everything becomes a blur of random encounters and loot drops. So what gives? Above all, D&D and TTRPGs is a story, one with complicated mechanics that impose game-like structures, but a story nevertheless. And even though it's a different medium in books and movies, TTRPGs have some basic structural concepts we can recognize for use and benefit of our games. Today we're looking at scenes and sequels, originally screenwriting terms from Dwight Swaim's 1965 book, Techniques of the Selling Writer. Broadly, scenes are when things happen and plot progress is made. Sequels are moments of reaction and planning that follow. Okay, I got scenes and sequels here. Importantly, I don't want it to be an obtuse semantic argument that only applies to wannabe author DMs, although Jim Butcher, author of the Dresden Files, has an excellent blog post on sequels and novels. Instead, I want to take our ordinary notions of pacing instincts about what feels right wrong. We're naturally possess, and drop boxes around them in a way that makes them useful. Then once we understand the units work, we're better equipped to deal with pacing problems and manipulating pacing for our own ends. Let's get started. Scene versus sequel. All stories in the Western tradition are made of structural units called scenes and sequels. A scene where the action is taken, the plot moves forward, and a mystery story, this is when the detective interviews suspects, and a heist is when the thieves try to make impressions of the key they'll need in the big job. Indeed, the most common type of scene is a fight. Characters move toward the end of a dungeon to fight things along the way. A sequel, on the other hand, is less immediately exciting. In a book or movie, this is a reaction to a scene. It's a time for characters to process information and deal with their emotions. In a mystery, it's a detective sitting in the armchair, frustrated that clues are adding up. In a heist, it's a crew panicking when they realize some unexpected obstacle has complicated the job. In D&D, this could be a campfire conversation over long rests or extended periods of downtime after an adventure. Note, this is already something of a simplification. As we'll see later, scene and sequels can be applied on a scale of a single dungeon room or an entire plot arc. Scene and sequels are not synonymous with action, scene, and dialogue, seeing although there's strong correlation. Why do we need sequels? Some versions of D&D, especially the old school revival style, OSR, can ignore large-scale sequels entirely. Out of those tables, characters get together to roll dice, fight monsters, collect loot. And the next session looks toward the next dungeon. It's a great way to play the game. Treating it as a game, first-person shooter doesn't have long periods of navel-gazing and character development either. Sequels become useful, however, we want our game to be more of a story. In a story that simply goes from scene to scene, there's no time to breathe, form connections, and grow. A sequel is a chance for characters to take center stage. DM is done providing information, but the player characters are given the choice how they react and handle the revelations. Structuring scenes and sequels. So how do we use these? As mentioned at the top, most tables will figure out scenes and sequels automatically. Storytelling is ingrained in all of us. Using this structural framework allows us to do two things. Diagnose when the pacing feels wrong and control the pacing for our benefit. Let's break down the scene, the sequels, more formal components. Scene, action, goal. The character proactively sets out to achieve a goal. Conflict, character faces an obstacle, prevents them from achieving the goal. Disaster, payoff to the conflict. Something goes wrong and prevents the character from achieving their full goal. We'll examine what this scene is shortly. Sequel, reaction. The character experiences an emotion reaction to scene. Dilemma, the character is faced with a choice of how to achieve their goal, given the new circumstance and information. Decision, the character decides on a new goal. So you can see scenes as equals flow to another goal. Conflict, disaster, reaction, dilemma, decision, goal. Goal, conflict, disaster, and then reaction to it, and then dilemma of how to choose, their decision, and then the end goal. By chaining these together, we get the structure of a story all the way until the end. You're either acting or you're reacting. Anything outside of that we call a side quest, diversion, or downtime. How does this fit into D&D? As with disaster, in your typical prose story, characters rarely receive a full-blown win until the end of the book. After all, if the protagonist achieves their goals, the story ends. Okay. First glance, TTRPGs don't follow the same formula because they're not self-contained stories with a clear ending. The game is designed such that players tend to defeat the villains at the end of every dungeon. It's expected the boss will lose and loot will be attained. How do we reconcile this? Simple. If a dungeon or conflict is fully resolved, then by definition there's no need for a sequel. That particular story is over. It becomes a loose thread or plot revelation that the game changes that becomes a disaster. And that necessitates a sequel again. If this is a prescriptive method for your game instead, it's describing natural player behavior. If the loose plot thread is never explored or reacted to, that sequel never comes into existence, and that's okay. Take a look at an example. Say your party fights their way through a Yuan-Ti temple and slays the Hydra at the bottom, collecting all the loot available. If the only important question or plot thread was, can we complete the dungeon, then the question has been answered and that particular story is over. That's totally fine, but let's imagine ways this party could be a disaster. Party member died, obviously this is a disaster. The rest of the party must react and decide who they will seek out to revive their fallen member. The party was chasing a villain who escaped. The conflict was resolved, but not fully. The party must react, deathly frustrated, and then decide, if at all, they want to pursue that thread. And then you go back into the reaction, the dilemma, and the decision to pursue, and that gives rise to the sequel. Okay. A PC learns they are a prophesized hero. This is an obvious disaster, but it's an open question that isn't answered simply by clearing the dungeon. The PC must react and decide they want to steal this new information, leading to new scenes, pursuing the thread. Payoff to the conflict. A disaster kind of thinks in negative terms. I don't know, I feel like there's a better word for that, but the logic checks. Plot threads, big and small. So far, I've been describing scene sequel at the story and dungeon level. In truth, the beauty of the structure is that a natural part of decision-making and storytelling. It happens every possible level of structure. When dungeon crawling, goal. Reach the end of the dungeon. Conflict. Monsters. Fight. Disaster. This wasn't the final room, now I'm down some hit points. Reaction. Darn, I should have blown my 4th level spell. Dilemma. Do we push ahead or rest? Decision. Short rest for now, and we try the left corridor. On a larger scale, let's apply the entire quest and plot threads. Goal, I want to find a lost sword of my people. Last said to be found in an ancient tomb. Conflict, the tomb is full of monsters and hazards. Disaster, the store has long since been shattered. Reaction. Insert SpongeBob noises. Dilemma, how do I fix the sword and save my people? Or SpongeBob dolphin noises. And decision, I must travel to a distant volcano and reforge it in the fiery caldera. Manipulating scene sequel format. Examples are nice. How do you put this into practice? Honestly, it's a bad idea to actively try to impose structure in your game. It can feel artificial. If so, I'm thinking along these lines. We're moving too fast. If story feels too fast-paced, breathless, and gamey, might be a result of too many scenes without any breaks. Yeah, so this is like where you want conflict to arise, but not necessarily directionally based conflict. Kind of come at it from a side angle or introduce other social elements in a conflict that can't be resolved through just sheer fighting. You might also see this pick. Often this happens when a group of players new to role-playing as they silently move from encounter to encounter. You might also see this pick up near the climax of an arc or campaign. There's time pressure, there's resource pressure, there are lives on the line. In that case, the breathless sensation is often something you want to encourage, as long as you eventually provide a climactic battle to make the tension worth it. Prompt sequels. This is easier said than done, but it's a useful skill to add to your toolbox. You can't force players to RP among themselves, but you can nudge them in. A wise NPC might stumble across a campfire, or a cryptic dream might get some information. Solution 2, be silly. Alternatively, and this is a dirty little secret, add a little bit of humor to your game. Personally, I'm not a fan of silly encounters or out of game puns, but a quirky NPC might offer a tarot reading or a bit of goofiness to a long rest. Relieve tension and humor, deployed appropriately, one of the most effective ways to do so. We're moving too slow. If it seems like it's lacking progress, we're moving too slowly, it might be because players are caught in sequel mode. Unable to choose a goal. This often happens with analysis paralysis. Faced with many important choices, characters terrified of making the wrong decision and leads to waffle and argue endlessly. So add scenes. Matt Colesville's classic Orcs Attack is a great way to solve this. Combat is a fundamental scene unit of D&D. It's action to its purest form. More generally, the DM can force the plot to hit the characters. Villains begun their evil scheme, a key backstory, NPC shows up in town, or 4 ancient dragons burn down the city. I'm not sure I've seen that one before. Maybe a mod? Nah, couldn't be. This new scene changes the status quo and hopefully pushes characters to new decisions. Add downtime. Alternatively, some time dilation might work. Downtime is the classic example. Give the characters a few days or weeks where they aren't expected to adventure. Instead of playing out the day-to-day and getting nowhere, gap over long stretches of time to the next scene. Okay, keep it casual. If you struck around it in the essay, I assume that scenes and sequels are a tool you find interesting enough to try at least in the back of your mind. It's not something else you need to consciously be aware of because there's so much else that's directly relevant to your enjoyment of the game, but it can be a nice gut check when necessary. DMs know this framework can help you diagnose a few reasons why your campaign feels off, as well as provide some ideas to fix it. If this doesn't work for you, then just ignore it. We are storytellers at heart. Players knowing this framework can help you take initiative and keep the story moving. If you recognize that indecision has paralyzed your group, you can push to decide upon a goal. Feels your party is simply going through the motions of dungeons, then maybe sit down with a teammate and ask how they're doing. At the end of the day, stories are driven by the choices of their characters. Scenes and sequels are defined by your goals and decisions. Take pride in that power. Thanks for reading, and I hope it's helpful for your games. If you like what you're seeing, follow me on Reddit, check my subreddit, or read more about my latest project. It's pretty useful. I didn't put anything else. Cool. Alrighty. I'm definitely going to save this one for a bit more reading later, as a bit jam-packed of information. We'll check this person out later. I will say... I enjoyed the long read, period. it has put some form and structure to the intuitive yet formless nature of storytelling. Period. Formless understanding. Are there any other books or essays that you would recommend further on these topics? Question mark. Are there any other books or essays that you would recommend further on these topics? We'll go ahead and say PS. I give this essay an A. All right, it's very informative. Definitely most people wouldn't check into that, but I do like the thoroughness. Something to think about. Yeah. Go ahead and do that. Goal, conflict, disaster for scenes, and then sequels, reaction to limit decisions. Okay, something to think about. All right, what do we have here? Strahd on the anime beach episode, humor. Okay, I'll pass that. I made a town character sheet called the Towninator. I'm horrible at names, but I hope you can use it. Okay, let's see what we got here. You as a GM to keep track of all your towns in your setting. Furthermore, allow you to keep track of how they're developed, how your players influence. Without further ado, let's town size. Okay, categories. Okay, so they have some points tables. Interesting. Development. Buildings. Terrain modifier. City specialty. It's almost like RPG systems for being a town. Education. And militaristic, the types, add-ons. 3 ways to influence things. Okay. So we got an N, a faction sheet at the bottom. That's not done. This is something I think I'll look at later. It is awfully interesting. Let's see if they posted anything else or any clarifications. Not seeing much of anything. That's okay. It's an interesting, I think, probably a bit overkill. That's okay. Let's see. So we have an ASMR Mercy Monk. Okay, Awake Bass. You have Saren Zephyriel. Or Zephyriel. Or Zephyriel. He's supposed to be CR10. He's supposed to be, what, level 10 sidekick? I wonder if this is based off Tasha's rules. Got Pack Tactics as a monk. ASMR. Okay. Interesting. Seems a bit strong. Meditative breathing. Bonus action. He can get hit points. Short long rest. Improved critical. Insightful step. Intuitive defense. It's 10 plus dex plus whiz. Okay, typically 10 plus. Hand of healing. He can just do it. Wait, he can heal 6 hit points per turn. I mean, it's supposed to be CR 10, but that seems super strong without having a resource attached to it, like 3 times a day or something. That means players can always kind of get up. Hand to harm. So touch attack. Oh, he can do an additional. So heal or hurt. Makes 3 attacks plus 8 to hit. Okay. He seems awfully stacked. Period. Is there any particular reason he has pack tactics? Question mark. Also, the Hand of Healing not having a finite resource, like X amount per short or long rest, seems that it could be really powerful. Period. Okay. That's a lot of damage, healing, a lot of everything there. Let's see. By Steven 7. Hi all, following the tips on Sly Flourish, decided to try and reskin the salvage operations here for be more scene themed. We are in the Ghost of Saltmarsh subreddit. I'm going to change webs to slime, have the druid worshipping a different god, and link it to the summoning of the Kraken octopus. I'm wondering, does anyone have any suggestions for replacements of the ettercaps, giant spiders, sluffers with pirate abomination hybrids? Kraken octopus stuff. Sea spawn, 4 spiders, ettercaps, cult fanatics, 2 cultists, ghast, druid, a sea hag. Makes it sea spawns, oozes cult. Yeah, this one's actually pretty good examples. You have Kuatoa, that's actually not a bad idea. Let's see, Riptide Priest. 2 cultists, that's fine, just cultist. Cultists, great oozes. I'm gonna go ahead and say this is a good reply. I would add that maybe you could add what would be fun for what a cult ooze Kraken. I would have to say, let's look in Appendix C here, the Ghost of Saltmarsh module. Deep Scion. We a drowned ascetic. ASC. For more undead. Just the drowned in general. On 233. Let's see what else we got. Probably not co-length. I'll have to look though. Not that. Not pirates. Probably not the slogan, although you could do that. Scum. Ooh, we could do scum. Actually, not a too terrible idea there. Okay. You could add the drowned for more undead vibes. You have curse, Ghost of Saltmarsh, 233, Appendix C. How did I cut that out? And let's do this. I would add, let's just say Appendix C is a good resource for you with the module for other ideas. I would add that you could add the drowned for more undead vibes. 233. Or perhaps have some Aboleth scums on board. Cool. That's that'd be my recommendation there. Turns your world map into interactive Google Maps style. Okay, this is gilded all over the place. Let's see what we got here. Okay, you can add your own little markers. Very cool. At HTML, CSS, and the markers by Olio and DM Academy. Okay. Leaflet, JavaScript library. We might check that out a little bit later. Go ahead and save it. Seems pretty cool. Okay, a bit long-winded for Demi-Lich stuff here. Past that, Dwarven Mine interior. Well, that's interesting. I'm gonna say that for a little later too. Okay, here we go. DM Academy by the Geese. So. Mic might be a little too sensitive here. Let's try changing that just a little bit. Okay. So, is it a really dumb idea to turn a player's old character into a mini recurring nemesis? I'm in a campaign I am running. We had a PC level 2 paladin die at a really low level, and he's kind of bummed out about their death. Kind of want to bring back his character as an Oathbreaker style revenant that wants to plot against party for a list of spoiler warning reasons. That's a good idea. Talk to the player about bringing him back. What's the best way to go about this? Should I have him somewhat play the character? Talk to them. That is the advice. I didn't post anything. Talk to them about this. Period. If you're willing to write a way for this character to be back into the story, they need to be on board with it, or else that will hurt them even more than they apparently are bummed about the PC death. Period. Personally, I would make sure that you treat the once PC as now an NPC that you control. Period. Maybe let the player play the NPC for part of a session or a scene. Period. Scene, if both of you are cool with it. Okay. Talk to them about this. If you're willing to write a way for the character to be back in story, they need to be on board with it, or else it will hurt them even more, and they apparently are bummed about the player character death. Personally, I'd make sure that you treat the once PC as now an NPC that you control. Maybe let the player play with the PC for a part of a session, or a scene if both. Scene if both of you are cool with it. Play the NPC. Cool. All right, moving on here. A missed opportunity for 5E, alternatives to resistance and vulnerabilities. Ghost Man on 3rd. So I know Wizard of the Coast took a less is more approach with 5E. I'd say overall this has been really successful. I don't think I'm too unsatisfied with the system except for a handful of places. One of these places is a pretty binary, resistant, vulnerable system. When it comes to damage types, a creature is resistant to X. Basically boils down to use everything but that. Whenever a creature is vulnerable to that, only use that. And that's about it. DM goes, he doesn't take as much damage as you would think, and the players go, oh, right. Or the inverse, where the DM explains the damage seemed to be higher than you thought. I think I'm much more engaging monsters. Flesh Golem, a version of fire. Golem takes fire damage as disadvantage on attack rolls and ability checks until its next turn. Lightning Absorption. Whenever the golem is subjected to lightning damage, it takes no damage and instead regains a number of hit points equal to the lightning damage dealt. Top of my head, I can already start playing around with these features. Have a mad artificer who casts protection from energy on a slush golem. The party has to decide, do we want to do less damage but give him disadvantage? Maybe said artificer also stays across the room and casts lightning bolt at targets through his golem, which reinvigorates him and damages the party. Get excited about building a counter like this because it's going to force the players to think how they want to handle it. They want to burn 2 turns just dashing across the room to pound the artificer, or do they tank the golem, cast weaken fire spells? They're going to go after the artificer. Feels like a really missed opportunity. Yeah, it definitely could be expounded more. I think it's much harder to run for newer DMs or casual players with these sort of things other than just simplistic game terms or simplistic things like that. Not entirely miss. I agree it could use more. Yeah, that's pretty much just what I said. One of the things that work in small amounts, like adding hot sauce. I went with my box 100-foot soldier. It's all have convoluted effects like this. A dungeon theme works pretty well. Wasn't that why 4E failed? Because there are too many enemies with abilities? It's a little more complex than that, yeah. Soft weaknesses. I think that's about all we have. Matt Colville, action-oriented monsters approach. I think it's possible to get too overboard with some of these, yeah. I think it's for existing monsters, difficult to change them unless the DM does a cushion of the counter. Mechanically, yes. Thematically, no. They're different. Yeah. Yeah, I think this is, This is somewhat underutilized, I think, for a reason, period. It makes running encounters a lot slower / more difficult for players to understand, especially more casual audiences, and even newer DMs to run, period. I do like your idea here. It sounds pretty cool. But if every enemy has soft vulnerabilities or weaknesses, then things may get more tedious to run or for your players to understand. Period. I would either use this for more special encounters, or if you're going to utilize it further, probably talk to your players about this or include it in the session 0. Period. For a reason. Period, you should be a period. Cool. It makes running encounters a lot slower / more difficult. You can just do / for players to understand, especially more casual audiences, and even newer DMs to run. I do like your idea here. Like that, and we'll change that. It sounds pretty cool, but if every enemy has soft vulnerabilities or weaknesses, and things may get more tedious to run for you or your players, more tedious to run or for your players to understand. I would either use this for more special encounters, or if you're going to utilize it further, probably talk to your players about this or include in the session 0. Yeah, no, it's I think it's going to cause, potentially for the players and those with shorter attention spans, a lot more confusion. If it's, if you're adding these creative homebrews in. But I think it's really cool. All right, and with that, we'll go ahead and take a small break, and we will be back. Hey everybody, we're back. I just want to check a few settings here. Okay, settings need to be updated. That's fine. A bit louder than I want. But that is okay. We'll just do this. And we'll move this back a little bit. Okay, we'll try that. Sorry for the loud mouse clicks. We'll get that sorted out for next session. So, moving on here. Quartermaster Navigator's Tools. The quartermaster plots the ship's course and navigates, but I've never heard of this. I've always known that term to refer to someone who divides up resources. Quartermaster, if I recall correctly, does both. I know master sailing or sailing master was a term for navigator. They just mix up the words. They got the terms confused, wanted the term quartermaster and first mate. Yeah. On land, a quartermaster responsible for supplies. At sea, quartermaster explores a navigator. The master naval. Yeah, I think it was just a simplification on their end. Sailing master versus a quartermaster, both seen as just a nickname. Let's see. There's a bunch of pirate ship stuff. I have to check my own stuff for this one. Mostly this one alone. I have to check my own tools and reference. It's not really conducive for, I think, helping people. It's just kind of more or less arguing semantics. I was too ambitious, and now I'm burning out. Ah, yes, the inevitable struggle. By Dungeoneering Dave. DM Academy, good day to all. I'm a relatively new DM, but I like to think I'm a well-practiced story writer. You're probably not as good as you think you are, but, you know, that's saying that with the best intentions. Things are a lot more complicated than people realize, especially when you create a bunch of stuff like culture and conflict. I've been DMing for over a year, so very new, for a group of my friends, and that mine will explain my plight. Last campaign was okay, not great, but not bad either, just meh. I constructed the players a very big and urgent time limit on the expiration of the mortal coil, a multi-dimensional threat. Okay, time limit rushed through the campaign, very little time to explore, so you made a sandbox. No expiration date, better overall. What's the problem? Since it is open-ended, I'm covering all bases of who and what they might interact with, and this means that every NPC introduced has about 3 paragraphs of backstory in order to make them feel real. Yes, even the one-time use NPCs like a random merchant that sells basic potions. Point whichever NPC is more likely that I know exactly who their parents are, where their drinks come from, what side of the bed they sleep on, and how they take their drinks. This is not restrictive to NPCs either. Every pebble, stone, and pillar exactly has gotten to be there. What book does this library have? You made a small book in order to have them feel supremely immersed in the world. Okay, doing too much immersion. You created over a dozen varying documents with hundreds of lines of lore. I have an exact timeline of every major and minor historical event. I have created an Excel sheet with dynamic changing prices for global trade, ranging from a sack of grain all the way up to a kilogram of diamonds. I have a custom-made periodic table complete with cultural names associated with said metals. So to save you time, Now that I've run myself up and down the wall like a million times in an attempt to ensure that my players feel like they're participating in a living, breathing world unique to the game I'm running, it's taken a toll on me badly. The sleep by sacrifice will never return to me, and I now fear that I might burn out altogether. If I'm being honest, they pass by and skip 90% of the lore I write for the world. That, or they miss the environmental hints. So the question is do you think it's worth to continue working this way, or to make sure my players never find a crack in the facade that I've created? Should I stop? I don't know if it made a scene interacted with another DM, at least not personally. Maybe the world's too big and too heavy with lore, half of it's gone to waste. Woo, okay, did they put anything else? Because first of all, as a DM, you have to realize that you're never ever going to fully build a fleshed out world. Even if you spend every waking hour, every waking moment of your life, you can never flesh out an entire world full of reasons, explanations, people. It's all too much. You can only do so much. So you have to basically use smoke and mirrors to give things some depth, give things some shade, give things more lore, less lore, simple NPCs, complex NPCs, and you're all trying to balance that all together in a seamless, illusionary transition. Seems to me they feel like they'll fail, and they're trying to keep up a lie that's impossible to keep. Let's see if they expand further. Not considered before. Yeah, let's do simple stuff. Don't do as much prep. Honestly, I try to do it without first thinking. I can somehow prepare for every inevitability, but I see the error of my foolish ways. Let's see. Story writing is vastly different than DMing. In story writing, you are in complete control. Okay. So, their questions. Do you think it is worth working this way? Should I stop? So, is it worth? No, it is not. And then go into failure. Should I stop? You should stop preparing this much. Try these things instead. Okay. Let's try doing this. Quote block. Do you think it's worth it to continue working this way to make sure my players never find a crack in the facade I've created? All right, let's do that and then do this, a quote. If it is impacting your physical and mental health, then no. We'll go ahead and say no. You are on a path to I have to type this out. I got to get my thoughts together. We'll just bracket like this. Path of burnout. Not having fun. And then we'll go into I theorize failure, fraud, imposter syndrome. You should have fun. No, let's be theorize. Okay, putting all my vowels in the wrong places. Imposter syndrome. Principles. Work smarter, not harder. Recycle others' ideas slash ideas slash things to save time. Give some direction and plan for the probable. I should have fun. Iceberg, we'll say iceberg theory. That's good. I think this is it. So yeah, they've gone from just being simple to needlessly complex and unsustainable. Okay. So let's go ahead and push that stuff down. Is it impacting your physical and mental health? Then no. You are already nearing the end of the trail of DM burnout. Period. You are not having fun, comma. You are not enjoying your time, comma. This path that you are on is unsustainable. Period. Oh, is it doing the whole... Oh, I don't want it to format it like that. It just has to go back to normal. Undo this. Path that you are on is unsustainable. You have come to realize the iceberg entirety. Period. It is impossible to create every facet of a homebrewed world, and that actually creating culture, comma, conflict, comma, history, comma, religion, comma, etc. is way more time consuming than people realize. Period. Okay, you have come to realize the iceberg entirely, not just the 10% above the surface. It's possible to create every facet of a homebrewed world. Like creating culture, conflict, history, religion, thousands of NPCs, etc. And is way more time consuming than people realize. What if I should say that for my second thing? I think we'll just move on and patch this up together nicely. I question why you are working this hard. Period. If I had to guess, It looks to me the reason you're putting this much effort is because you don't want to fail, comma, let your players see, break the player's immersion, comma, and if I have to guess, may have even a bit of imposter syndrome. Period. I question why you're working this hard. If I had to guess, it looks to me the reason you're putting this much effort into this is because you don't want to fail. You don't want to fail. Or lower the quality of your immersive work. You probably don't want to break their immersion. If this is the case, then I have some unsettling news, comma. No matter how much work, blood, sweat, tears, sleepless nights you put into this, this is a fantasy world and a game. Period. And that's okay. Period. You and your players should show up every week energetic to play this game. Period. You're a human being with limits, not a virtual reality simulator. Period. Okay, I question why you're working this hard. If I had to guess, looks to me, the reason you're putting this much effort into this is because you don't want to fail or lower the quality of your immersive work. You probably don't want to break their immersion. If this is the case, then hey, thanks for staying around. Hope you're having a good day today, especially with that cardboard. If this is the case, then I have some unsettling news. No matter how much work, blood, sweat, tears, and sleepless nights you put into this, put into prep / world building. This is a fantasy world and a game. And that is okay. I'm not sure if that formats as bold or italic. Probably could just do it like this. Make it italics. This is a fantasy world and a game. That is okay. You and your players should show up every week energetic to play this game. You're a human being with limits, not a virtual reality simulator. If you haven't felt like you well, it's a good thing you didn't, Good thing to have those small little fantasies. If you haven't felt like you have failed yet, or they have seen through the simulation, then you will in time either quitting all together, or your body and mind failing you due to stress or lack of sleep. Stress, anxiety, or lack of sleep. I'll do that backwards. Okay, question why you're working this hard. If I had to guess, it looks to me the reason you're putting this much effort is because you don't want to fail, lower the quality of your work. No bail money, Sag. I get it though. If this is the case, then I have some unsettling news. No matter how much work, blood, sweat, tears, and sleepless nights you put into practice world building, this is a fantasy world in a game. That is okay. You and your players... Oh, we'll break this up. You and your players should show up every week energetic to play this game. You're a human being with limits, not a virtual reality simulator. If you haven't felt like you have failed yet, or that they have seen through the simulation, then you will in time. Either simulation, then you will... if you haven't felt like you have failed yet, or they have seen through the simulation, then you will in time, either quitting altogether, or your body and mind failing you due to stress, anxiety, lack of sleep. It almost seems to me like you've constructed a lie and are trying to prevent it from getting out, ultimately to no avail, and your detriment. Period. It almost seems to me the way that you describe your issue is like you constructed a lie and are trying to prevent it from getting out. Ultimately, to no avail or your detriment. So, how to move forward. There's an R there. So how do we move forward from this? Now we'll do how to move forward with the group. Put that there, and then we'll do some ideas that will help you prep less is as follows. One. Learn to create complex and simple NPCs. Brilliant. It's just learn to create. Not every NPC needs a name or an entire backstory. Some just need potentially a silly accent or some other meaningful characteristic, and maybe a bit of knowledge for the players. Period. Learn how to improv more. Period. If you have a basic skeleton idea of a simple or complex NPC, then you are better equipped to improvise their dialogue and their words. Period. You won't need entire scripts for them. Period. We'll say next thing is recycle others' works, ideas, maps, etc. A lot of DMs have great ideas or contributions that you can adopt for yourself to take some of the work off your shoulders. Period. Let's see, what else is a good idea? I mean, these are some three simple things. I think we've tarried a tad too long on this. I think 3 things is good for now. How to move forward with the group. You have one of 2 major options with your group moving forward. We'll go ahead and do this one. Be honest with your group and check in with them about how you're feeling, how some things in the actual campaign need to change for your emotional well-being. Period. How you're feeling. Let's see how you're feeling. How some things in the actual campaign need to change for your well-being. And how they feel so far about the campaign. 2, scale back your prep work and continue to check in with the party about how they're feeling. Period. You may find in time that you can do 60% less work and get around the same happiness and effect from your players. Okay. Be honest with your group and check in with them about how you're feeling, how something the character campaign need to change for well-being, and how they feel so far about your campaign. 2, scale back your prep work, continue to check in with the group, and check in with the group about how they are feeling. You may find in time that you can do 60% less work and get around the same happiness and enthusiasm from your players. 4. Drop plot points that lead your players in some directions more than others. Period. Leaving options too many options is detrimental for you being able to focus and use the content you have, as well as creating I think literally that. Leaving too many options is detrimental for you being able to focus and use the content you have. Let's see, learn to create complex, simple NPCs, learn to improv more, recycle, drop plot points. And the fifth one is build skyscrapers, not motels. If you want things to feel like an immersive world, don't worry about all the small townships and little places that you can easily skip over with a bit of monologuing the players to the next destination. Period. Focus your work on the important parts of the campaign, like cities, dungeons, townships, etc. Period. If you build too far and wide, then things aren't as immersive because you have to you spend less work on them. Period. Build skyscrapers, not hotels. All right. If you want things to feel like an immersive world, don't worry about all the small townships and little places that you can easily skip over the bit of monologuing. Focus your work on the important parts of the campaign, like cities, dungeons, townships, etc. If you build too far and wide, and things aren't as immersive because you have to spend less work on them, because you have less time to spend on them, because you spend less work on them. Okay. All right. Actually, this is a lot more than I thought it was going to be. All right. Do you think it's worth continue working this way to make sure that my players never find a crack in the facade I have created? If it is impacting your physical and mental health, then no. You are already near the end of the trail of DM burnout. You are not having fun. You are not enjoying your time. This path that you are on is unsustainable. You have come to realize the iceberg entirely, not just 10% above the surface. It is impossible to create every facet of homebrewed world, like creating culture, conflict, history, religion, thousands of NPCs, and we're time-consuming than people realize. I think we can leave that there. Question why you're working this hard. If I had to guess, it looks to me that the reason you're putting this much effort into this is because you don't want to fail or lower the quality of your immersive work. You probably don't want to break their immersion. Break the players. And possessive immersion. If this is the case, then I have some unsettling news. No matter how much work, blood, sweat, tears, and sleepless nights you put into practice world building, this is a fantasy world in a game. That is okay. You and your players should show up every week energetic to play this game. You're a human being with limits, not a virtual reality simulator. If you haven't felt like you have failed yet, or they have seen through the simulation, then you will in time. Either quitting altogether, or your body and mind failing you due to stress, anxiety, or lack of sleep. It almost seems to me the way that you describe your issue is like you constructed a lie and are trying to prevent it from getting out. Ultimately, to no avail and your detriment. Some ideas that help you create help you prep less, learn to create complex and simple NPCs. Not every player character needs a name or entire backstory. Some just need potentially a silly accent or some other meaningful characteristic, maybe a bit of knowledge for the players. Backstory. I'll do a semicolon there. Learn how to improve more or improv more. That's why we double check. If you have a basic skeleton idea of a simple or complex NPC, then you are better equipped to improvise their dialogue in the word. You don't need entire scripts. SCRIPTS. Recycle others. Possessive. Works. Ideas, maps, etc. A lot of DMs have great ideas or contributions that you could adopt for yourself to take some of the work off your shoulders. Try plot points that lead your players in some directions more than others. Leaving too many options is detrimental for you being able to focus and use content you have. Build skyscrapers, not motels. If you want things to feel like an immersive world, don't worry about all the small townships, little places you can easily skip over with a bit of monologuing. Focus your work on the important parts of the campaign, like cities, dungeons, townships, etc. If you build too far and wide, then things aren't as immersive because you spend less work on them. How to move forward with the group. You have one or two major options with your group moving forward. Be honest with your group and check in with them about how you're feeling, how some things in the actual campaign need to change for your well-being, and how they feel so far about the campaign. Scale back your prep work and check in with the group about how they are feeling. You may find in time you can do 60% less work, get around the same happiness dozen for your players. All right, in summation. Too long, didn't read. You need to change what you are doing, comma. It is not working and is unsustainable. Period. Use some of the tips 1 through 5 that I have mentioned, as well as others here. Period. Have a talk with your players about how you're feeling. Period. Work smarter, not to death. Use some of the tips on here. Some of the tips 1 through 5 that I have mentioned as a start to relieving your workload. Have a talk with your players. Maybe have a talk with your players about how they're feeling. Work smarter, not to death. All right, that needs to be capitalized. And wow, we spent a lot of time on this one. It is not working and is unsustainable. That is semicolon. I mentioned as a start to relieve your workload. Cool. All right, so that is my comment. You know, a good old page of information here. Okay. All right, we are done with that one. Goodness. All right. DM Academy doesn't play tuba. Is it okay for everyone at the table to agree your homebrew plot is convoluted? As per the title, I have a homebrewed plot. First time DM, honestly first time D&D. Why do you do it to yourself? And my group consists of a few lifelong friends. I always ask them how they enjoy the game so far and what they like, but as we have slowed the pace down due to scheduling issues, I've noticed when we do play, they refer to the NPC as whatever's face, or refer to doing the event at hand as whatever this guy said. I'm understanding maybe my homebrew is a little hard to follow, but it sucks no one cares about the game I made just for them. Okay. So, thoughts. DM/player expectations. Playing game they want to play. What is it called? Player interest? Question mark. Feeling unappreciated. Some players forget easily. Some don't take notes. Okay, they posted anything else for us to play off of for this? Okay. Railroading talk. Getting past that. Oh, I also need to do that. Oh. Okay. So, remember you have all the cards. Okay. So, this could possibly be an issue of DM versus player expectations. Period. Do you know what the players' interests are? Question mark. Do you have an understanding of what they like to do in D&D? Question mark. It's quite possible you're writing a story genre, like horror, while your players are wanting to be in an action movie, for example. Period. Perhaps you aren't meeting their expectations, and currently they aren't meeting yours. Period. It seems to me that you are feeling unappreciated. Period. That's a bad feeling to have. Period. Just my advice is that some players forget easily plot points, NPCs, details, and oftentimes these players don't take notes. Period. It doesn't necessarily mean they are enjoying it or paying attention. They just don't remember names. They remember more likely their feelings surrounding the individual or plot point. Period. Yeah, I was gonna have something else. Kind of forgot. Someone will take notes. Do remember that for plot points, you have all the cards. They have maybe one. Period. You're going to see the threads of the mystery or the arc that they may not see. Period. I was going to say, nope, not there. You mentioned that they weren't playing. I always ask them how they enjoy the game so far, what they like, but as we have slowed the pace down due to scheduling issues. You mentioned that there are some scheduling issues, and that may also be a reason they're forgetting the plot. Period. Oh no. Okay. Okay, then we have everything here. This could possibly be an issue of dealing with player expectations. Do you know what the player's interests are? He just said they ask. So we'll skip that. Do you have an understanding of what the players like to do in D&D? It is quite possible you're writing a story genre like horror while your players are wanting to be an action movie, for example. Perhaps you are meeting their expectations. Perhaps you are not meeting their expectations, and currently they aren't meeting yours. Seems to me that you are feeling underappreciated. That's a bad feeling to have. Just my advice is that some players forget easy plot points. They forget details, plot points, NPCs. They forget specific details like plot points, NPCs, like detailed plot points, and NPCs, and oftentimes these players don't take notes. It doesn't actually mean they are not enjoying it or paying attention. They just don't remember names like they remember. My goodness. Doesn't necessarily mean they are not enjoying it or paying attention. They just don't remember names like they remember their feelings surrounding an individual plot point. You mentioned that there are some scheduling issues, and that may also be a reason for getting the plot or names. Maybe a reason for them. Do remember that for plot points, you have all the cards and they have maybe one. You're going to see the threads of the mystery of the story arc that they may not see. I would there is another possibility here. There's another I guess I'm gonna go into it. Screw it. There's another possibility here of lack of player buy-in to your story. Now, let's just not even, let's put that here. Say player buy-in is important. Player buy-in with the story is important for most players to be motivated in learning / remembering the events. Word, I would say another piece of advice is to run a module and then homebrew your story elements, ideas, etc. into it. You are a new DM that is using a lot of different unused muscles. Period. Learn to focus on the elements of engaging players and exciting them, and less about writing entire plot threads. Period. There are plenty of other story arcs you can always reuse or take for your own. Period. You're going to see the threads of the mystery. Another piece of advice is to run a module and then homebrew your story elements, ideas, etc. into it. You're a new DM that is using a lot of new muscles. Learn to focus on the elements of engaging players and exciting them, and less about writing entire plot threads. There are plenty of other story arcs you can always reuse or take for your own. Cool. All right, I think we're done with that one. All right, another essay down. Boom. Needing DM advice, encouragement. Here we come. 2 hours ago, no one's respond. Someone. Oh, no, 4 people respond. Okay, just took a while to load. Dungeon Masters has 4 comments, 2 upvotes. That's odd. Description hot 4898. Hi Dungeon Masters, I'm new to D&D and very new to DMing. This is my second attempt to run a game. First one fizzled out because I went to the hospital. Okay. My current session was set to begin about a month ago. I say set because every week half of my players aren't available. One player only just finished his character 2 days ago. Another decided to run their own game the same day. The only day I was able to run. I made things up from scratch so that no one would miss the campaign, which I've been trying to connect each character to. Okay, so you're trying to make an overarching story, but people aren't committed, it seems, and you're putting in all the work into the wrong place. I'm absolutely crushed at this point. I don't feel respected. I put in a lot of work to get everything together, ready every week, planning out things to happen after the campaign, and I haven't even been able to begin it. I don't really want to anymore. Should I just put away my pride and wait patiently for people to want to play? They put anything else here? Such a cute idea. Okay. Gee, this one is once again another thing. So many red flags here, or even yellow flags. Do. Okay. I'm in a very planning mood today, so we are just going to say yellow flags, player commitment. Okay, so yellow flags, player commitment. Sounds like party, no one attended. That sucks. Have fun too. Try to maybe meet new people. Some friends, not good players. Okay. There are a handful of yellow flags that I see as potential problems with this post. Period. Oh, not that. Did I have that emote? Oh, I guess I don't. So let's just do the straight old Sag. Let's see. There are a handful of yellow flags I see as a problem with this post. There is not enough information to be precise with my diagnosis, but I will take a stab. It seems to me that not all of your players are committed. Period. The way you wrote this sounds like you prepared an entire party for people to say that they'd come and they didn't show up. Period. That's a bad feeling. Semicolon. That really sucks. Period. There are a handful of yellow flags. I see potential problems with this post. There's not enough information to be precise in my diagnosis, but take a stab. Seems to me that not all of your players are committed. The way you wrote this sounds like you prepared an entire party of people to say that they'd come and they didn't show up. That's a bad feeling. That really sucks. Nope. With. Perhaps your friends may be not as interested in playing D&D as you are. Question mark? Maybe they're not even very good friends. Question mark? Maybe they're not even good friends. Some friends are great friends and bad players at your table. Period. This could possibly be it. That out. Some friends are great friends and bad players at your table. Perhaps try meeting and inviting new players for your game. Period. I don't know how trustworthy or good they'll be if you search online, but you might be able to find some good or great players or friends along the way. Period. Making it up from scratch. Remember that D&D is a game and you're a player too. Period. You should run D&D because you have fun doing so, not because you feel compelled to. Period. Remember that D&D is a game and you're a player too. Run D&D because you have fun doing so, not because you feel compelled to. I would recommend getting a module and try running that instead of writing a homebrew world. Period. That way you have a skeleton for a campaign and can put some of your ideas into them. Period. Okay, that way you have a skeleton for a campaign and you can put some of your ideas into them. Play. Okay, I think that's pretty good for what I got. Oh, I was gonna ask, how old were they? Seem a tad young, and if they are, then it's probably more commitment than scheduling. If they're older and they're more adults with careers and kids and all that, then more than likely it could veer more toward actual scheduling conflicts. Oh well, move on. Hey Dan, what's your process when building an epic campaign? As a post says, lol, what are your go-to process for making your world, hooking your players in the first session, early tying together your villain? Matt Colville stuff, Jimmy Crobb, Roomhammer, that's a lot of posts. To say it's an epic campaign. When you say epic campaign, are you referring to homebrew? Question mark? I feel that all campaigns are standard, but the group synergy your understanding of players' expectations and wants, and some of the unforeseeable events make a campaign epic along the way. Period. It takes a certain kind of chemistry to make a campaign epic for everyone involved. Period. My recommendation for most DMs is to take an established module and then homebrew and add in some elements that you want. Period. As long as your players are into the genre of the default module, or you can modulate it to get their buy-in and investment, and add in the small details that players will remember, that'll make it epic. Period. Say epic campaign referring to homebrew. I feel that all campaigns are standard, but the group synergy, your understanding of players' expectations and wants, and some of the unforeseeable events make a campaign epic along the way. Take a certain kind of chemistry to make a campaign epic for everyone involved. My recommendation for most DMs is to take an established module and then homebrew and add in some elements that you want and what your players want. As long as your players are into the genre of the default module, or you can modulate it to get their buy-in and investments. As long as your players are into the genre of the default module, or you can modulate it to get their buy-in, if you do your how do I say this? Your buy-in. As long as you, let's do that. As long as you can modulate the story to get, let's say, player buy-in, and add, there we go, and add in the small details that players remember, that'll make it epic. That'll make the campaign epic. When you say epic campaign for a homebrew, I feel like campaigns are standard, but the group synergy, understanding player expectation wants, and some of the unforeseeable events make a campaign epic along the way. It takes a certain kind of chemistry to make a campaign epic for everyone involved. A recommendation for most DMs: take an established module and then homebrew and add in some elements that you want and what your players want. As long as you can modulate the story to get player buy-in and add in small details that players remember, that'll make the campaign epic. Cool. All right, that is my recommendation there. Ooh, conspiracy web templates. Interesting. Okay. Yeah, this is pretty cool. I like it. Feywild, Death by Party, historical ad, 1274, Team Academy. Some level 4 player characters got into Feywild, or into the Feywild. Okay, it's on homebrewish. At the moment, they are next to a large Fey settlement. The moment they stick their noses near the settlement, they will be besieged by satyrs, Eladrin, pixie sprites with a bunch of food, song, and party. Wait, so they're going to be besieged as in they're throwing a party? In fact, this party never ends, and exhaustion levels pile up to player characters dying. Ah, the more devious of the trickstery... what is it? It's not seeming, it's not compelled. Compulsion? Is that the spell? Sounds about right. Creature of your choice can see within range and that can hear you. Until the spell ends, you can use a bonus action to designate direction. No, it's like compulsion, but it's different. It's basically you have to keep doing the thing until like you make your save. What spell is that? I know where I have to look it up. That would take me a bit of time. Enchantment spells. Oh, that's it. Doing like 30. Zone of Truth. Synaptic Static. Suggestion. Not Suggestion. Otto's Irresistible Dance. Oh, that's the one. That's for dancing. There's another one though. Yeah, it's just for a minute. Is it Mass Suggestion? 24 hours. Oh, that's the one that makes them run. Jim's Gold Coin. That's got to be AI. Yeah, that's incorporated. Gift to Gab. You have Gaish. Technically, that's 30 days. Maybe that could work. Fast Friends. Enemies Abound. Encode Thoughts. Confusion. Compulsion. Command. Oh, Antipathy. Sympathy. Causes specified creatures feel an intense urge approach to target. Oh, it's Sympathy. That's it. Antipathy, Sympathy. That's the one I was thinking of. Yeah, 8th level. That's what it sounds like to me. Still, I want to offer them Way South. Every time they encounter fake creatures in mass, it'll be the same story. How can they defeat this threat? Now, is it all fake creatures? Because not all fake creatures wouldn't inherently do that. That'd be more of the Winter Court versus the Summer Court aligned Fae. And that's a Fae that actually worry about the inner working politics, but that's the whole thing. How can they, as material planewalkers, walk heavily populated Farewell without being harassed every 5 minutes to actual death? Why are you trying to like railroad them to party to death? I feel like you've just like written like no other options. It's like a completely railroaded story plot. If there's anything else. Do all Fae inhabitants do this sort of forced partying? Question mark? It seems that you have somewhat railroaded all Fae to this sort of behavior. And the party, by exploring the Feywild as a result. Period. I think you have an idea here, but probably need to rework it in detail so they can interact with it, or make it a small faction of Fae that do this. Period. This allows you to go further into the politics of the Feywild, as well as the different factions, their dress, their ideologies, etc. Period. Perhaps this is an instance where you can show them, not tell them. Period. Have the players walk up to a party and have some poor souls trapped and partying, warning the players to run or get away, or else they'll die. Period. It almost sounds like the party is like an antipathy/sympathy spell. Period. Do all Fae inhabitants do this sort of forced partying? It seems that you have somewhat railroaded Fae to this sort of behavior, and the party, by scouting the Feywild as a result. You have somewhat conscripted Fae. Say conscripted Fae to this sort of behavior, and the party now, by scouting the Feywild, now must avoid everyone. Dolphin inhabits this sort of forced partying. It seems that you have somewhat conscripted Fae to this sort of behavior, and the party, by scouting the Feywild, must avoid everyone. Must avoid everyone. I think you have an idea here, but probably need to rework it and rework it. Work it so they can interact with NPCs, or make a small faction of Fae that do this. This allows you to go further into politics of the Feywild, as well as different factions, their dress, their ideologies, etc. Perhaps this is an instance where you can show them, not tell them. Have the players walk up to a party and have some poor souls trapped in partying, warning the players to run or get away, or else they'll die. It almost sounds like the party is like an antipathy and antipathy/sympathy spell. I would refer to this spell and its weaknesses as a way out. Okay. Do dragons enjoy destruction? Seems like people just trying to ask very blanketed questions here, but sure. Bites the dust on Dungeon Masters. Do dragons enjoy destruction? I know metallic dragons are chaotic evil. They're not entirely chaotic evil, they're just evil aligned. But is destructiveness in their very nature like demons? Not so much destructiveness, just greed. More to the point, do they take pleasure in slaughter and devastation for its own sake? Not necessarily. Or destruction, a side effect of being a giant elemental breathing lizard, they don't really mind. Anybody else? Well, actually, Chromatic Dragons are evil, but not all Chromatic Dragons are chaotic. Metallic are mostly good. Keep in mind, you can mold and shape dragon personality. refer to user Soldine and their descriptions on basic chromatic dragon typing. They are by default and their lineage inherently more evil aligned, not necessarily chaotic evil. Period. Much like the dwarves, a dragon's greatest sin, greatest deadly sin, either chromatic or metallic, is greed. Not is greed. Basically, dragon typing, they are by default. They are by default and blank. They are by default and their and their lineage. They are by default and by their their lineage inherently more evil aligned, not necessarily chaotic evil. Much like the dwarves, a dragon's greatest deadly sin, either chromatic or metallic, is greed. Black dragons innately are the most cruel and sadistic of the chromatics, and would likely destroy property or others for sport or pleasure. Okay, black dragons innately are the most cruel and sadistic of the chromatics and would likely destroy property or others for sport or pleasure. It's great descriptions here. Cool. So, all right, another one. Okay, so I was a little over-prepared for my first session as a DM by human number 4. So my main fear going in was that I didn't want to leave people feeling like they had no choice in the matter. They had to do this quest or else. Within the first 10 minutes of the campaign, I had excitedly given my party 2 of whom were complete newbies. Of the plot threads and side quests I prepared for the area. That was 8 different things within 10 minutes. Oh, so they go into town and it's all the exclamation points. And the NPC that told them all this was also quick to tell them that they could do whatever they wanted out of these options or none of them at all. No real build up other than, oh yeah, these are the problems I'm expecting to deal with right now. And also I had them start in the capital of the world because on some level I wanted to make the world feel busy, alive, and they were only ones that the quest or objective or story to complete. I tried to course correct as I was going, but what I need to say next week is going to start with an apology and a more focused idea of, okay, so this is what you want to focus on now, we'll build around it, and then I can slot in the other side quest a bit more efficiently. Any tips on how to keep the word vomit away from overwhelming everyone with all your ideas? Okay, so he gave him so this person gave him a quest that they didn't have completed, and they were I tried to course correct, it's going well. Needless to say, next week is when we start the apology and more focused idea of, okay, so this is what you want to focus on now. We'll build around it, and then I can slot limited choice. Limited choice is good for people to make a choice. If you overwhelm them with choices, people have choice paralysis or other things. So I'm just going to say there are many other ways to make the world feel alive than making a ton of quests like an MMO RPG. Period. One element of game design is making sure that players have a good amount of options, but not free reign or too many options. Period. This will not only make your life as a DM easier, but will prevent choice paralysis or players feeling overwhelmed on what they want or what they feel like they should do. Period. Okay, there are many other ways to make the world feel alive than making a ton of quests like an MMORPG. One element, why did it pluralize that, of game design is making sure that players have a good amount of options, but not free reign. Or too many options that not only make your job as a DM easier, but will prevent choice paralysis or players feeling overwhelmed on what they want to do or what they feel like they should do. All right, that's pretty simple, pretty succinct. I think that's pretty good. All right, we're gonna do one more. Problems Tying It All Together by Berserker Bishop. Hey team, I jumped back in D&D after a long hiatus. After falling in love with 5e, I finished up a campaign recently and noticed I'm having problems really pushing the story to the final chapter. My stories are too convoluted, making it hard to keep track of what's going on. Game of Thrones style confusion. And the main drive of the antagonist seems lacking. Any tips for a world or story building that keeps things simple enough for the players, innovative enough to capture their attention? Oof. They're going into it. Not sure how many tips I can give without telling the whole story. The timeline idea really helps. I think I did a good job with the villain's past and motives, but I was trying to reveal the villain's motives through a twist. A series of mysteries that showed itself in the third part. The campaign was fun, but I think fell off when the heroes say the main villain for the first time. I expected my players to remember a little detail. They couldn't remember half of the NPCs 2 sessions ago. Yeah. It's better to keep story plots simple than complex. Players most players have a bad memory and won't see all the small threads that you make. So you have to make your plot points more obvious rather than more subtle. Period. Easiest advice I could give is to understand what the players find interesting or what captivates their attention. Period. It could be a simple plot point, but the player has buy-in for whatever reason and is motivated and will ultimately pay more attention. Period. As far as villain motivation, villain, motivation, 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 motivation. Hey, we got it after the fourth word. Nice. Villain, motivation. You need to, if you don't have one already, a page about the villain's backstory or other elements, period. What is the villain's flaws, bonds, etc.? Okay, better keep story plot simple than complex. Most players have bad memory and won't see all the small threads that you make. So you have to make your plot points more obvious rather than more subtle. Easiest advice I could give is to understand what the players find interesting or what captivates their attention. It could be a simple plot point or story arc, but the player having buy-in for whatever reason will be more motivated and will pay more attention. As far as villain, motivation, you need to understand their bonds, flaws, secrets, and ideals. From here, what conflict is going on in the world, or what are their end goals? Okay. Boom. All right. And with that, that is all the time we have today for the D&D Help Desk. So let's see who is streaming some Dungeons and Dragons and who we want to raid here. Let's see what we got. Okay, they're live. Hey, okay. All right, Blue Box RPG. Looks awfully interesting, so we'll go ahead and begin to raid them. Nope, don't do that. Just keep the formatting simple. All right, so we are going to go on a raid. Don't forget the raid kit, and we still got to get Chris here. So we got Nightbot chat on Twitch. All right, and we will go ahead and begin our raid. So let's go ahead and do that. Go ahead and do this. And we will be off. I'll be back tomorrow. Everyone have a good evening and good night.